And now we're going to start with the plenary session. Without any further ado, I'd like to request all of our plenary speakers to kindly join us backstage, and we are going to start in just a moment. Moving on to the first the plenary session of the day, we have an eclectic line of speakers deliberating on the topic CISO 2025, Strategists, Techie, Operations Focused, or Business Enabler. Where the CISO roles have matured to help business executives to take informed business decisions, and CISO roles are now in amalgamation of technology expertise, operations, and strategic thinking. This plenary session shall be deliberating on how the CISO role would be in 2025 and what would it be defining parameters of this critical role. To discuss this forward, we have an esteemed panel joining us this afternoon. Mr. Vishal Salvi, CISO and Head of Cyber Practice at Infosys, will be talking to us. Mr. Sameer Raje, who is General Manager and Head of India Zoom Video Communications, is also on the panel this afternoon. And Mr. Uday Deshpande, CISO at L&T Group of Companies, will also be talking to us. To moderate the session, I'd like to request Mr. Forum Mehta, Senior Director APAC, CISO at PayPal, and Mr. Mehta would be setting the tone of the session, and other panel members will after that join us as per the flow of the discussion. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you, Mr. Mehta, and over to you.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thanks a lot once again for taking the time to attend BPM 2021. In interest of time, let me just get right into it. As you heard, we have an amazing set of panelists gathered together to share not just their journey and their experience, but also generally kind of make sense of the trends that we've been observing as to how the role of the CISO vis-a-vis the industry that we call now as cybersecurity, that started as compliance or information security, and it'll continue into who knows what, continues to transform into a cost center to a business enabler. To get us started, I'll just, as I mentioned, just jump right into the questions. And the first one I'll ask to Vishal. Vishal, as I mentioned, we started about a couple of decades ago with the first CISO roles being really defined out of necessity by folks that were asked to take the role either from a general management role, either IT generally, or compliance areas. And now we have reached an era where the specialized CISO are seeing that, more and more responsibilities are being kind of put on their list of things to take care of, whether it is risk, whether it is fraud, whether it is physical security, and so much more. So based on your journey, where you started and where you've come from, it'd be nice to share some of the anecdotes and what you see as the true transformation that is taking shape in the role that we all still call as CISO.
Okay, thank you so much, Puram, and good afternoon to all of you, and wish you all a good event. It's basically, it's been a fascinating journey for me specifically because, it's interesting again that you mentioned about 2 decades. That's exactly how my career has panned out in the last 2 decades in cybersecurity. And we know that in those days, we sort of, got into cybersecurity not by design, but almost by accident, because it was not really a career stream and it was not a well-defined role per se. And so, we were obviously, sort of shooting in the dark, so to say, when we actually kind of got into this profession. But, we not really looked back after that, and for a large part of my career in the initial days, I was just thinking that I was going to go back to line, and go back to IT leadership roles. And it's only when, I've done this role for 6-7 years that I realized that, I think this is really a good career option, because, there's never a dull day and there's always something to do and create value. But since then, I think specifically from a cybersecurity profession point of view, it's not been a sort of a dramatic transformation. It's been a consistent, ongoing transformation for the last 2 decades, where every time, every year, as the technology has evolved, as the frauds have evolved, as the threat actors have evolved, the profession itself has evolved, right? and and so it's obviously now become very mainstream. And so when you look at a CISO role today, it's all about leadership qualities, the the executive presence, the ability to create a strategy, the ability to be able to give a vision to your team, to lead them into a direction that all needs to really focus on. And then the very important aspect of engaging your stakeholders and influencing them in a very meaningful way, because in today's day and age it's not about my problem is bigger than yours. It's about coexistence, right? It's about really trying to make the other party really come on board towards the cause of cybersecurity. And I've said this in past that cybersecurity profession is a catalyst to the larger change that you want to drive within an organization, right? But I think you have now become a very important ingredient to that change. So I think therefore it really touches on various behavioral and technical elements for a CISO to really be able to juggle all of these things and put all of them together in perspective, and be able to consistently add value to your organization. And bear in mind, it also needs to not go overboard, because if you go overboard you start really consuming resources and energy of the organization, and start stifling the business, in a way. So the balance is very, very important. And it's really fascinating, in terms of how the role has evolved.
Spot on, Vishal. So let me kind of pick that up and ask you being a CISO at a business that probably has gone through the transformation that Vishal spoke about, and then being in the CISO role from a permission authority to an enablement advisor to the business on how their digital transformation kind of continues. The journey continues while keeping the risk that the organization can take within the appetite, within the traditional playbooks, if you will, of a business that is, pretty mature, pretty large, trying to do a lot of things, and leverage the technology advancements that are coming without increasing the risk too much. How do you find that balance that Vishal spoke about, and in your day-to-day roles as a CISO? Hi, Uday. Sorry, there must be some technical difficulty, but looks like you're on mute now.
Oh, okay. Are you able to
All
hear
right,
me?
perfect.
Oh, sorry. So the thing is that, like Vishal has said, this role has become more of strategic in nature rather than operational and technology in nature. Because now the CISO has to, on a continual basis, identify and align with the business what kind of key products, processes, and technologies are getting introduced within the environment. And he has to articulate through qualitative and quantitative matrices on how the information security has been improved within the organization, how the risk posture has actually uh, gone better on from time to time, because this posture is basically going to result, or basically is going to contribute to improved customer and stakeholder confidence. It is going to reduce the overall regulatory burden, also increase the customer and trust and reliability within the business partners. And in general, this is all going to contribute to the enhanced reputation and the brand enhancement of the company or the organization. So the role has become very, very strategic in nature. The value which is going to come through this function is also become of very, very significant importance. So from that perspective, it is very important for the CISO to align with all the key stakeholders and continuously give the risk posture picture to senior management on a regular basis and also to the stakeholders. Another area where he can, significantly provide a value is basically that the CISO has to engage himself at an early stage as far as the other initiatives are concerned, such as merger acquisitions are happening, or new bids or proposals are happening to the government or any other agencies, or new products or new technologies are getting developed within the organization, where the CISO involvement is very crucial right from the beginning itself. So if the CISO gets involved from the beginning, he will be able to identify the risks at the early stage, and he'll be in a better position to give his perspective to reduce those risks. So that from that perspective, CISO can add a lot of value in the initial stage. Last and not the least is, CISO has to become very, very aware of who the stakeholders are, who the end users are as far as those technologies are concerned. So he can increase the awareness from a contextual manner. So there are two sides. One is basically a generic user awareness, and second is the awareness in a more contextual manner, because he has to protect the crown jewels. And in that regards, whether it is design department or the proposal or the department which creates the quarterly or annual results, it is important for him to give the specific guidances in an early stage to those departments, so that those important data can be protected, so that the organization gets protected from those damages which can damage the reputation of the company, or get into the financial loss. So these are very, very specific areas where CISO can get early engagement and then provide the business value. So that is what my take in this regard.
Okay, thanks for that. It's coming to you, Samir. In a lot of ways, right? No session today, no best practice playbook can be complete without talking about COVID's impact on it. And in a lot of ways, obviously, your business and how it redefines how collaboration happens, how productivity is measured in a lot of these organizations. You've had I think a front seat view into how organizations have changed. So share us some of your perspectives on how CISO's role, right? I mean, it changed overnight as well when they had to provision laptops, access remotely. But with everything moving digital, it was also a lot of good opportunity for businesses that could engage into these type of transformations of their workforce and their business to truly kind of accelerate the growth projects that they wanted to do. So maybe share from your perspective, how do you see the CISO role coming into whether working with the other CXOs, CIOs, and enabling the collaboration without, while keeping the insider threat, the new threat landscape evolution in mind?
Sure. Thank you so much, Param. And first and foremost, it's a pleasure to meet you all, and thank you for having me here. So, I think I would second what Uday and Vishal just mentioned. Right, there are a couple of key pointers, if I may say that, in both Vishal and Uday mentioned. The role has become more strategic, and there is more of partnering with the businesses. And if I have to take one step behind, and even before the COVID or the pandemic started, the organizations had already started transforming themselves towards an employee experience or being more customer centric. So it was all about EX and CX. And when the world has changed in this pandemic, it has become more and more focused on employees and the customers and how we deliver value. So in that context, I think first and foremost, the CISOs have now started partnering more with businesses rather than, being just if I may say, like a an authority to keep a watch on what's going on, right? So today it's no longer a situation where a CISO can say that, hey, you know what, this tool is good enough, it's approved by us, and it has to be used. Rather, it is more towards, okay, what's working at the ground level? Is it acceptable by the business? Is it acceptable by the customers? And does it meet the organization security standards and parameters? It's a marriage of both. Before, it was more of a top-down approach where, okay, this is approved, this is what it needs to be done, and go ahead and live with it. So that was it. And over a period of time, that has changed. Now it is more business centric. Now, the second thing during the COVID, which has happened is, employees are working from home in a remote environment. And especially when the tools which have been offered to them do not work, they end up finding their own ways. That has caused a massive problem. This challenge, especially if I may say, puts the responsibility on the employees to a very great extent, where they are the CISOs of their own personal office space. And as a CISO of an organization needs to look down on each of these separate silos or offices at their residences and ensure that the employee is doing the right things, using the right tools, and not violating or going beyond the protocols by using some personal space. Like, for example, something is not working in collaboration, you end up using some other tools to collaborate with your customers. Now, that can really put not only your devices, but entire organization at risk. So is the collaboration tool really working for the employee when he or she is working from home? Well, that is something. So that's where the partnering element has come in. So to summarize, a couple of aspects. First is more about the employee as well as the customer-centric experience. And CISOs today, and as they are becoming more and more strategic, the importance of partnering with the businesses to ensure that the ground level realities are met and the solution which is offered functions really at the ground level. That's the key, and that's a major change which has happened over the last month.
Gotcha, Samir. So, while it was nice to walk through the journey from past and to the present, and seeing, especially right now, what's happening, let's talk a little bit about the future. Maybe start with you, Vishal, and would love for Uday and Samir to jump in. If I were to ask you a couple of years ago, what keeps you up at night, you'd name some threat vectors, some of the new attacks and other things. If I were to look at just generally what are some of your top priorities, I think regulations to some extent, cross-border impact, and how geopolitics to some extent would be top of the mind as well. Looking at what's been happening, especially based on ransomware and how it is transforming the entire I think view that a lot of CISOs and the businesses take. I mean, in Colonial's case, we saw that a bunch of investors sue by name the CEO and the CISO and a couple of board directors, directly as people responsible for the losses that occurred. How do you think of the evolution of the role as the personal accountability and the visibility from an organization kind of increases at that level?
Yeah, I think there are some 2-3 important points that are in that question. I mean, the first one is in terms of ransomware obviously takes the first 10 positions before we start talking about other threats right now, because that is top of the mind for everyone. And therefore there's a risk that other issues can get defocused or deprioritized, and we won't be able to focus on that. So I think that risk is definitely there. The second thing is, I think in today's day and age, a modern cybersecurity strategy has to be more agile, more adaptive, and gone are the days when you can sort of apply a framework or a methodology and say that so long as I follow this, I should be fine. It's not going to work. You need to really create something which will work in the context of your organization. You can't take a straight-jacketed regulatory or a compliance-driven approach and that you are safe and secure. In that a lot of regulations and can sort of bring in a lot of complacency, thinking that because I'm doing so much, I'm passing audits and I've been so many times, and everything is green, I am safe and secure, which is actually living in a fallacy, right? So I think you need to recognize that, and I think from today's context, you need to really be able to ensure that you have a very clear understanding of how you're deploying controls, the amount of uh, vulnerabilities we are pumping in and patches we are pumping in now is at least 3-4 times higher than what we were doing last year. The refresh cycles of operating systems and different applications are shrinking by half, and so I have seen refresh cycles of 5 years, 6 years for a endpoint operating system. Now we are doing it in 1 year's time, right? This is causing humongous amount of stress, but you got to do it because without that, it's very difficult. And so, while it is important to do a business enabler role and working closely with the businesses and risk management, and I think all of that is important, you also need to have certain controls which are mandatory in nature, where there is zero tolerance towards non-compliance, and you can't allow a business or individuals to take decisions on those risks. You need to make sure that poor IT hygiene is there is a zero tolerance to that, right? But I think to your last point on personal accountability, I guess it's a very interesting point, because yesterday we were having a global conference of global CISOs across the world, predominantly from North America, and I think the this issue of CIO and CISO's accountability came up, and it's not well understood, and it's still one is about the legal conversation, but really a CISO is as good as what the culture of that organization is, right? So my sense is that eventually the maturity will prevail in terms of how the world looks at this role, and no matter how empowered it is, and no matter how much you're driving it, the organization as it together has to take a collective responsibility of a failure or a success of a given security program.
Yeah, very well covered. Uday or Samir, would you like to add anything?
I agree with Vishal completely. It's whether the CISO is empowered or not. It's basically CISO who has to continuously try and improve his visibility or cybersecurity visibility within the organization on a continual basis. May it be a workshop, may it be continual awareness newsletters to the board and senior management, saying that incidents are inevitable, incidents are going to happen, and it's just not a matter of compliance for which you need to take those proactive measures, but in general you have to reduce the impact of the incidents, and in that regards, that creating the visibility, creating the awareness within the senior management, saying that when the incidents happens, it is not only the responsibility of the technology team, it is the responsibility of the whole organization to deal with it as a team, is very, very critical. So from that perspective, the role of the CISO or the entire cybersecurity is that create that visibility, create that awareness within the organization that incidents are going to happen, and then try to reduce the impact as a team. And in that regards, whatever investments needs to be done from people, process, or technologies, and accordingly, the roadmap has to be created, taking into consideration the entire accountability of the organization, and that is something which is going to drive the future roadmap for the cybersecurity organization. That's what I can say, and completely agree with Vishal on that front.
Sure. Samir?
Right. So I think couldn't agree more over here. And keywords which are of people, processes, and technologies. Right. I think that's the key to it. And as I mentioned in my previous response, it is a lot to do with, especially in this geographically spread out world, when employees are working from home, that they are responsible and made aware of probably the do's and don'ts, and the impacts possible impact assessment, or what will happen if something is not done right. In terms of application, and if I have to talk about collaboration itself, right? Usually the option is one solution fits all industries kind of a thing, but it doesn't really work because the security parameters for what a bank needs versus what an IT company needs are totally different. And having the users configured and being able to use that such a platform within that parameters is something that a CISO or a technology team needs to evaluate, that it's not a solution which is a common platform, just deploy it and start using it. Each of the industry has its own security parameters, be it fintech, be it healthcare, be it IT. So the configurations are very different and needs to be done. So that's on the applications, especially on the collaboration front.
Sure. So I have one last question for the audience. If you still have any more questions, we have a few minutes left. Please do put it in the chat window. We've discussed a lot of these challenges, and it's good to end the best practice session on a happy note, on something where the opportunity that we've all kind of been privileged to kind of partake in and develop our careers. So for the folks that are thinking about having CISO in their path, in their development plan, could each of you give one best practice advice that you practice and has worked for you for the next gen? Maybe we can start the order the other way. Samir?
Well, being at the other end and having been through a lot of security questions, and we often go through these security checks every when we deploy our solutions, especially for the large enterprises. One thing I can say is, when it comes to security, being honest, being upfront, and being frank is something one. So, for example, what we did is, when there were questions raised about Zoom security, we formed a CISO council. We invited close to about 30 CISOs from different industries on our platform, and we took suggestions in terms of how can we improve, what can we improve. We went into a 90-day feature feast program to ensure that we plug in whatever the recommendations were given and whatever flags were raised. And that was first in the industry. Nobody has even thought about it, that no features development for the next 90 days. That's a big thing. And we came out in the open and said that, okay, we are going to fix this. And while not all problems were Zoom related, a lot of problems were consumer related, where platform was used in a very different manner. We embarked on a journey to educate. So I think that's what is important, being honest, upfront. There is no organization, there is no application provider who will probably not go through the scrutiny of security and face challenges. But how we stand up to it, how we face, how we create awareness, how we spread the message. And that goes to a CISO within an organization also, how the end users are using the application, and making them aware of the risks of the do's and don'ts. I think that's what more open we are, more frank we are. That's what my
Thanks, Samir. Uday, maybe if you could keep it brief, and one best practice that for advice for next gen CISOs.
As the thing is that right now there is a talent crunch across board. All the verticals, all the organizations are facing a lot of talent crunch. So right now, I would basically advise on the CISOs is try to catch the young generation as early as possible. Tap the organizations who are specializing in cybersecurity. So for the last 2 years, we are experimenting with it, and we are basically trying to employ as many interns as many possible within the organizations. And once we have good experience with few interns, you can groom them, and then you can absorb them within the organizations. Because getting the laterals has become a very, very tough job in the current scenario. And if you catch them young, if you groom them, the likelihood of them staying within the organization is quite high. So, and it has worked for us to a good extent. And future CISOs basically can, from the talent training and retention perspective, they can use this approach.
Gotcha. Vishal?
Yeah, so I'll talk about three behavioral traits that CISO should have. First is you need to be confident. You need to be confident about what you're talking and what information you're sharing with your stakeholders. You need to be humble, uh, and not be overconfident, and be open to receive and empathize and receive feedback. And number three, you should be extremely paranoid about what's happening around, so that you are constantly looking at how you are looking at the risk and managing it. So these are the three traits that behavioral traits that CISO should have, so that it can become successful.
Okay. I don't know, Aditya, if we'll have any time for audience questions. I just did want to sum it up as be honest, start young, be confident, but humble, and yet paranoid to be a great CISO in the future. With that, I think we should end since we are a little bit over time. So thanks a lot,
Thank you.
all of you as panelists, for coming, and wish you all a amazing rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.